You know, the story of the golden calf is probably one of the most infamous moments of betrayal in the entire Bible. But what if it's not just some ancient story about failure? What if it's actually a blueprint for a problem that is just as real and just as tempting for every single one of us today?
And that right there is the central mystery, isn't it? I mean, just try to put yourself in their shoes for a second. You've just seen the sea split in two. You've escaped generations of brutal slavery. You're literally being fed by miracles falling from the sky. Why on earth, at the first sign of trouble, would you melt down all your jewelry to build a statue of a baby cow? It makes absolutely no sense. But the answer, it turns out, is hidden in a few crucial clues. All right, so our first clue takes us right back to the place the Israelites had just escaped from. You see, you can take the people out of Egypt, but you can't always take Egypt out of the people. And we're not talking about a quick visit here. This was centuries of total immersion. Their whole understanding of God, of power, of how the world worked, was filtered through an Egyptian lens. And when you get scared, when you feel lost and confused, you don't typically invent something brand new. You fall back on what's familiar. So what was familiar to them? The Apis bowl. And this wasn't just some random animal statue. In Memphis, the capital of Egypt, the Apis was a real living bull that people believed was the physical incarnation of the creator god, Ptah. He was their go-between, a tangible, visible link to the divine. So this idea wasn't weird or foreign to them at all. It was a deeply ingrained symbol of divine power. So when Moses, their only link to this new, invisible God, vanishes up a mountain, what do? They panic, and they grab onto the symbol of leadership and divine presence they've known their entire lives. And when you start digging into the details, the parallels are, well, they're just mind-blowing. Okay, get this. When an Apis bull died, there was a 40-day waiting period before the new one was revealed, the exact amount of time Moses was gone. The people said they wanted a god to go before them, an intermediary, which was the exact job description of the Apis. And the party they threw, the eating, drinking, and playing the Bible talks about, it was a carbon copy of the festivals held to celebrate a new Apis. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a ritual they knew by heart. So, okay, that's one piece of the puzzle, cultural memory. But, a bad idea needs an opportunity to grow. And that brings us to our second clue, a complete and total failure of leadership. Never underestimate the power of fear. Think about it. Moses, the guy who literally talks to God, the one who led them out, he's just gone. 40 days. Complete radio silence. Of course they panicked. They felt abandoned, leaderless. And in that vacuum of fear and uncertainty, they demanded something they could see, something they could touch, something they felt they could control. And this is where you see the night and day difference in leadership. On one hand, you have Aaron. The mob comes to him, and he just caves. He tries to please everybody, mixing this pagan bull worship with a festival to the Lord, and when he gets caught, he blames everyone else. Then you've got Moses. He comes down the mountain into an even bigger crisis. God himself is ready to wipe everyone out. And what does he do? He stands in the gap, he argues with God, he reminds him of his promises, and then he deals with the sin directly. Oh, and Aaron's excuse? It's an all-timer. This has to be one of the most pathetic buck-passing lines in all of history. I threw it into the fire and out came this calf. Really? He takes the gold, the Bible says he fashions it with a tool, and then has the nerve to say, I don't know, it just kinda popped out? It's the ultimate abdication of responsibility. Okay, so we've got old habits and a leadership vacuum. But there's a third clue here. And honestly, this one might be the deepest and most tragic of all. It points to a wound that the people had been carrying for a very, very long time. There's this really powerful idea from trauma theory called a narrative gap. It's basically the hole in the story, right? The part that's so painful nobody ever speaks about it. For this generation of Israelites, the unspoken horror was Pharaoh's decree to commit mass infanticide, to throw their baby boys into the Nile. The story mentions the order, then jumps right to Moses being saved, but it's completely silent about all the other families, all the other lost sons. And this is so, so important. Trauma that isn't dealt with, that isn't mourned, it doesn't just disappear. It festers, it metastasizes. It comes out sideways in distorted, really destructive ways. When an entire community can't even name its deepest wound, that pain is going to find an outlet. And often, that outlet is violence. I mean, experts on this stuff will tell you there are basically 3 stages to healing from major trauma. First, you have to establish safety. Then, and this is the key, you have to remember and mourn the loss. only after that can you truly reconnect. The Israelites, they got to step 1. They were safe, but they never, ever got to step 2. And because they were never able to properly mourn their own children, that trauma just stayed there, unresolved. In a way, you can almost see the story of their escape, the death of the Egyptian firstborn, the drowning of Pharaoh's army, as a kind of violent reenactment of what was done to them. The cycle of violence was already spinning. And where does all that unresolved pain and violence finally explode? Not on their enemies. It explodes inward. 3,000 people killed by their own brothers and kinsmen. The very first act of justice under this new covenant is Israelites killing fellow Israelites. The cycle of trauma came full circle right there at the foot of the mountain. Now, it's really easy for us to sit here thousands of years later and shake our heads. But the thing is, the temptation that drove them is absolutely timeless. The desire to build golden calves didn't end in the Sinai desert. So let's get down to it. What even is idolatry? Well, it kind of has two faces. On one hand, it's when we try to take this infinite, mysterious, unknowable creator and shrink him down into a neat little box we can manage, a statue or a political party or a strict set of rules. And on the other hand, it's when we take a good thing from the world, money, success, a relationship, and we make it a God thing. We elevate it to the one thing that gives our life meaning. Speaking of which, does this look at all familiar? For thousands of years, the bull has been this powerful symbol of strength, virility, and wealth. The Israelites saw it as a god. Today, well, we put a giant bronze one at the center of the financial universe as a symbol of economic power. The form has changed, but the impulse to bow down to a symbol of wealth and power, that hasn't changed one bit. So what do our modern golden calves look like? A lot of the time, they're not even bad things. They're good things that we've just allowed to become the ultimate thing. Our career becomes our entire identity. Our political tribe becomes our only source of hope. Getting likes on social media becomes the measure of our self-worth. Even good things, like family or leisure, can become idols we serve with all our time and energy. And this, I think, is the key to the whole story. Remember where the gold for that calf came from? It was a gift from God. It was plunder from the Egyptians that was supposed to be used to build a place for him to dwell. Instead, they took his gifts and built a monument to their own fear and desires. And that's the essence of idolatry, right there. It's taking the good things God gives us, our talents, our money, our passions, and using them to build our own kingdom instead of his. So when you pull all these threads together, you realize this isn't just a story about some rebellious people a long time ago. It's a deeply human case study. It shows how the pull of our old familiar habits, mixed with fear, a vacuum of good leadership, and deep, unhealed wounds can create the perfect storm for us to go astray. It's a warning label for all of us, for any community, and any time in history. You know, their idol was obvious. It was a giant golden statue sitting right in the middle of camp. You couldn't miss it. The real challenge for you and me is to spot the idols that aren't so obvious, the ones we carry around in our pockets, or build silently in our hearts. So the question is, what are they? And what would it take for us to finally melt them down?